Greetings, everyone. Today, my name is, of course, John Korstein. I'm Director Emeritus of the USS Monitor Center and here at the Mariners Museum and Park. And today, I'm going to be telling a very unique story during the Civil War. Actually, it's at the top of the peninsula outside of Richmond, and it's known as the Battle of Newmarket Heights. I do want to let you all know that Newmarket Heights is part of a larger context, and often it's just referred to as the Battle of Chaffin's Bluff. But actually, Chaffin's Bluff is a two-part battle, which includes the Battle of Newmarket Heights, as well as the battle and capture of Fort Harrison. This was very, very critical, and you have to realize that this is in September 29 through October 1st. Really, we're going to be concerned with the first day battle today, which would be September 29th. I tried to get this date as close as I could. But the basic thing is that during the spring offensive, Grant has, of course, come down, crossing Germanna Ford and trying to push Lee's army back towards Richmond and actually to capture Richmond. As part of his grand strategy, and you have to realize Grant was, of course, General-in-Chief of the U.S. Army. He had everybody moving at the same time as best he could. He had Nathaniel Banks up the Red River. He had Sherman beginning his move down from Chattanooga towards Atlanta. He also has his army and then another army that's going to be here in Virginia, and it is the Army of the James, which is commanded by Benjamin Franklin Butler. We'll see a picture of him in a moment. But what I want to say is that Grant, while he's moving into the wilderness, he will send Ben Butler from Yorktown, Virginia, to go all the way around the lower peninsula, up the James, to Bermuda 100, where he's supposed to strike at the Confederate rail lines. If he breaks those rail lines, Richmond cannot be held. Consequently, the Union would be victorious. Now, I have to tell you that this is a grand plan, but he's dealing with Benjamin O. Butler, who Benjamin F. Butler, Benjamin Franklin Butler. Benjamin F. Butler, Ben Butler, as they mostly call him, is known as Spoons. Many people say all sorts of terrible things about him. One thing we do know, that he is a brilliant politician, a slickster lawyer. So actually, from a political standpoint, he's the man that creates the Contraband of War decision. He's the man also that has the Women's Order in New Orleans, kind of proving to the local inhabitants that the Union is in charge in many ways. However, one thing he's not noted for is his military competence. And so when he brings his Army of the James, 35,000 men, all the way to Bermuda 100, he does not cut those railroads. He is going to be corked in a bottle, according to Ulysses S. Grant. So here we have an impotent army that contains the largest contingent of United States colored troops in the Union Army in one unit. So this becomes very, very important. But I have to tell you, Butler has been recruiting African Americans ever since the Militia Act of January 1st, 1863 had passed, and consequently, what he will do is go through Gloucester County, York County, you name it, recruiting these African-American soldiers. And so he does find a great deal of troops. He actually orders his officers that the recruitment of colored troops have become a settled purpose of the government. It is the duty of every officer and soldier to aid in this recruiting, irrespective of personal predilection. So African Americans are becoming guarding both ends of his flanks. One happens to be the Rockbridge Artillery, and the other happens to be the Richmond Howitzers, extremely famous units during the war. Now, basically, the Confederates wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning. They kind of hear something's coming their way. So they have a hot breakfast, they get their guns ready, and basically the Federals do not get a breakfast. They are tired, and when they get near Newmarket Heights itself, they will actually boil some coffee and drop off their knapsacks and form their lines. Newmarket Heights, of course, had a signal tower so the Confederates could see what's going on. They had artillery batteries, so it's a well-defensive line. Now, Birney is supposed to have 16,000 men with him. Because of straggling, misconstrued orders, this attack is only against Newmarket Heights, is only going to have about 10,600 effectives. Now, as the soldiers lined up, I got to tell you, that this is an ominous looking sight that you have to attack. And Butler rides amongst his men shouting, "Remember Fort Pillow." Fort Pillow is an engagement in the Western Theater where Confederate soldiers led by Nathaniel Bedford Forrest were shooting prisoners, and it was just not good because they were black soldiers. And so, Butler tries to get them all ready. Now, he does give one order saying, "We're going to attack with our muskets uncapped." And the thing is, he didn't want the men to stop and fire and then reload. He wanted to have a definite rush that would go up the heights and take it from the Confederates. And so he, so this is truly a bayonet charge. He wanted to make sure that the officers were able to be heard above the din of battle. So this is just a pure bayonet charge, which is going to put the USCT at a very, very difficult position. Now, around 5 a.m., the skirmishers of the 22nd USCT will actually start to engage Confederate skirmishers. And so the soldiers of Duncan's brigade of 4th and 6th USCT, they had no knowledge of where the other units of Paine's division were in the attack. They were delayed by swampy terrain, so they were spearheading this attack on their own. Now, what did they have to do? They had to reach the Confederate earthworks. They had to cross about 500 yards of rising plain. Across this plain was 4 Mile Creek, which caused a marshy but not impassable swamp. Beyond the creek was a heavy wooded ravine, and which ran parallel to Newmarket Heights. And beyond the ravine, another open plain of about 300 yards sloping northward towards the road and the Confederate breastworks. And I have to tell you, the Confederates had also put in 2 rows of abatis, or as Confederates would say, pointy sticks, chef de frise. And so they had to, when the Confederates recognized there's no covering artillery barrage, and Duncan's regiment employed in a skirmish line about 200 yards long, with the 4th leading and the 6th echelon in the rear. He described his men disappearing as they entered a fog that enwrapped them like a mantle of death. "When we were ordered to do our duty, we went like men," said Christian Fleetwood. The Confederates held their fire until the USCT had crossed the open field, and the Confederates knew that there were black troops fighting, and so they moved forward. Actually, Private Joseph P. Pauly of the 4th Texas described the attack began with a roar that sounded like the bellowing of 10,000 wild bulls. Yes, you know, they were really ready to make this attack. Now they pressed their line into the Chateau and basically the men got through it and they dropped to the ground. And then by this time, most of the officers were either killed or wounded. And so the sergeants of the 4th USCT took over leadership. And after the battle, Fleetwood described the carnage in his diary. When the charge was started, our color guard was full, 2 sergeants and 10 corporals. Only one of the 12 came off that field in his own feet. Most of them lay there still. It was a deadly hailstone of bullets sweeping men down as hailstones swept the leaves from trees. It was very evident that there was too much work cut out for our 2 regiments. We struggled to 2 lines of abattis, a few getting through to the palisades, but it was sheer madness. As the 4th USCT became entangled in this first line of abattis, the veteran soldiers of Frederick Bass, the Texans, fire this tremendous volley. And so these men were all easy targets and were pretty well shot down. Their foothold above the abattis only lasted for moments. Bass's Texans swarmed out of their earthworks and pounced upon their enemies. And so actually the 4th USCT is going to be blown apart. And so most of the attackers were killed outright. There are some reports that some of the captured were either sent to Libby prison, shot, or made servants. When Duncan fell by 4 wounds, the command passed to Colonel James Ames of the 6th USCT. Instead of supporting the 4th, the men of the 6th launched their own attack. And this is going to not bear any better than the first attack. However, Ames sent them in a column advance, 6 men across, in an effort to try and pierce a part of the Confederate line. Colonel Ames said it was a pretty terrible encounter. We were all cut to pieces. Now I have to tell you that they are not done yet. Alfonso Draper has his 2nd Brigade has 13,000 men, and the 5th, 36th, and 38th USCT moved out to make an attack. Draper, of course, also put his men into a column with the 5th USCT leading, and instead of presenting a long line of targets, they were a very central force. Well, it didn't really make any difference because they were marching into a terrible blast of musketry and artillery, and they hacked their way through the abattis and struggled towards earthwork. And just like other regiments beforehand, the sergeants had to take up the colors, rallying the men, and Draper, because he's badly wounded, he is the only one that writes an after-action report of this engagement. After passing about 300 yards to Young Pines, always under fire, we emerged upon the open plain, about 800 yards to the enemy's work. Within 20 or 30 yards of the rebel line, we found a swamp which broke the charge. Our men were falling by the scores. All the officers were striving constantly to get the men forward. Well, the African-American sergeants and the white officers were able to really gain success. And however, all of a sudden the Confederate fires started to wither. And so the 4th and 6th USCT are going to be swept up in Draper's attack. And they're able to reach the Confederate earthworks. Actually, Private James Gardner was one of the first to enter the Confederate trenches. He then shot and bayoneted a Confederate officer with the words "Sic semper tyrannis." Oh my gosh! And so, and this Confederate officer is trying to rally his men on the parapets. So we have, this amazing attack that some of the soldiers in the 36 were badly wounded. Actually, one Corporal Miles James of the 36 had his left arm so mangled it had to be immediately amputated. Does he stop? No. He uses one arm to fire his musket at the enemy. And other soldiers like Sergeant James H. Harris and Edward Ratcliffe, others were just shot up by the Confederate fire. Now, while the Confederates are slipping at because Ord's division or corps is attacking Fort Harrison, which is a more key site for the defenses of Richmond, many of those troops move, and so the UST regiments are able to take the crest of Newmarket Heights. And one member of the Texas Brigade, Lieutenant J.G. Pickens, acknowledged that I want to say in this connection that, in my opinion, no troops up to that time had fought us with more bravery did those Negroes. Well, now the battle is going to shift. But questions, are remain about, why did the Confederates retreat? Because they're threatened at Fort Harrison. Did this lessen the bravery of the attacks or the success of the Union attacks? No, it does not, because these battered regiments will actually suffer serious 40% casualties. And Butler will immediately write Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, "My colored troops under General Paine carried entrenchments at the point of the bayonet, and it was most gallantly done, with most severe losses. Their praises are in the mouth of every officer of the army. Treated fairly and disciplined, they have fought most heroically." Butler actually had his answer whether the USTC could fight. He actually said, "I felt in my inmost heart that the capacity of the Negro race for soldiers had then and there been fully settled forever." Well, that's amazing, because that was, in fact, Northern correspondents were amazed at the bravery of the USCT during this attack. One member of the New York Herald, Thomas M. Look, their charge in the face of obstacles interposing was one of the grand features of the day's operation. They never halted or faltered, though their ranks were sadly thinned by the charge, and the slashing was filled with the slain and wounded of their number. Henry Jacob Wister of the New York Times is going to say it was a wonderful, a sublime sight to see those black men stand up to the rack. My gosh, Thomas Morris Chester, who was a black reporter from the Philadelphia Press, entered a dispatch. He said, a mere 5.5 miles from Richmond, that Paine's division had covered itself with glory and wiped out effectively the imputation against fighting qualities of colored troops. One thing is certain, that the colored troops who composed this division convinced the most skeptical that the Negroes will not only fight, but will do it desperately. Why? Because they were fighting for the freedom of their brethren. Oh my gosh, this is, it was a successful attack, and basically Butler decided that he really wanted to do more than just words to honor these people who fought in Newmarket Heights. And so, the Medal of Honor had been authorized in 1862 to be awarded at first just to enlisted men who fought on the battlefield. And so many of the soldiers that were heroes at the Battle of Newmarket, USCT soldiers that were heroes at the Battle of Newmarket Heights, people like Private Barnes, Gardner, and Veal, along with Corporal James, they're all going to be promoted sergeants. Actually, the surviving white officers of the 4th USCT, and Butler backed it, asked and petitioned the War Department to make Sergeant Major Christian Anderson Fleetwood a commissioned officer. They also tried to promote Sergeant Milton M. Holland of the 5th USCT to be captain, but the War Department refused to consider these recommendations. During the Civil War, 1,520 men and 1 woman received the Medal of Honor, but only so many African Americans received that honor. To award a Medal of Honor, recommendations from surviving regimental officers had first to go to division headquarters, then to Butler and a team of his subordinates. They sifted and figured out the names, and then that list would be sent to General Grant, which further reviewed it and then sent it to the War Department. Finally, on August 6, 1865, the War Department bestowed the Medal of Honor on 14 Black veterans of Newmarket Heights. The recipients, all but Sergeant Alfred Hilton, who died in the hospital. He suffered 4 grievous wounds during the action. Everyone else were still in their same units. And on April 6, 1865, they will be actually presented their medals of honor. I have to tell you that one Sergeant Miles James, who was a corporal at the time, who lost his arm, he said, "Look, I don't want to leave my regiment. I want to stay with them." So they gave him a duty with the Provost March, and of course, he proudly wore his Butler's Medal. These men continued to serve with their units. Actually, Miles James will be in the front rank of his UST unit, leading the march into Richmond on April 3rd, 1865. Milton Holland and Christian Fleetwood would be there at the surrender of General Joseph E. Johnson at Durham Station, North Carolina. And actually, their stories go way beyond of what they do after the war. I have to say that I am really, this battle, just Newmarket Heights, was a Union victory. It cost 5,900 casualties, 4,150 Union, and 1,750 Confederates. Now, who are these men? Where do they come from? What does it mean? Well, Private William Barnes was accompanied with Company C, 30th USCT, and his citation, although wounded, he was amongst the first to enter the enemy's works. He was promoted sergeant on 1 July 1865, and he died of tuberculosis on 24 December 1866. Palatine Beatty. He was first sergeant with the 5th USCT. He was born in Richmond, 1849. He moves to Cincinnati, Ohio. He becomes, wait a second here. I don't want to forget. That's John Gregg. Sometimes I forget mine. This shows the complex attack against the Union position. Here's a better view of the column attacks that happened. You can see where Gregg, Signal Hill, and the Confederate lines there at Newmarket Heights. This Charles Paine, who had a division of effort. Here's Alonzo Draper, commands a brigade of USCT. This is another view of the assault. You can see the breakthrough spot. And I have to say, this is a scene of capturing Fort Harrison. Some African Americans participated in the attack, but the ones that received the Medal of Honor all did so at Newmarket Heights. And so you can recognize the follow-up attack at Fort Harrison, which captured the fort, but it is of a tremendous note. I have to say that there were two other white soldiers that received the Medal of Honor there at Newmarket Heights. This is a beautiful painting by Don Trioni, who's one of the outstanding modern Civil War artists. And this actually shows Edgerton, who was actually born a Quaker, right? And during the invasion of Gettysburg, he breaks his covenant. He joins the Pennsylvania militia, and then because he's an ardent abolitionist, he is going to be, named as first lieutenant of the 6th USCT and adjutant. So 3 color bearers have been shot down in this scene, and basically Lieutenant Edgerton took up the flag after they had been shot down and bore it forward, though himself wounded. 2 other Medal of Honor recipients, you can see them to the left and right of Edgerton, will be Sergeant Major Thomas Hawkins and First Sergeant Alexander Kelly, supported Edgerton with the flags. Now, I have to tell you, one of the quirks is that Edgerton did not receive his Medal of Honor until 1898, whereas Hawkins and Kelly will receive theirs on April 6, 1865. Why is this? Well, as they're compiling the official records of the war, the rebellion, they start to note certain points of bravery. And if Edgerton is with these 2 African-American soldiers who had been victorious and showing bravery, saving the colors. And the colors were so important. You know, there was only one person who received 2 Medal of Honors during the Civil War, and that happens to be Tom Custer, who actually captured 2 Confederate flags, one at Nazarene Church and the other at the Battle of Salters Creek. His brother, George Custer, only received 1. So that was kind of like bad vibes for Custer. There are some Civil War veterans who will later receive Medal honors during the Indian Wars, but Tom Custer is the only one that receives 2. Now, let's talk about some of these other guys. This scene is so inspiring and so vivid and real. There, numerous soldiers. Let me get to a couple of them that I want to talk about. This is Palatine. It's misnamed Gardner, but this is Palatine Beatty. And Palatine Beatty, as I was saying, moves to Cincinnati, goes to high school, apprenticed to a cabinet maker, becomes a turner. However, he continues to study drama. And he was actually in one of the first units known as the Black Brigade that were organized to defend Cincinnati after the 30 August 1862 Battle of Richmond and Kentucky. And so then all of a sudden, he will be able to join Company G as first sergeant of the 5th USCT. He's a highly literate man. So during the Battle of Newmarket Heights, not only, 8 officers and 68 infantry soldiers are killed or wounded. And Beatty, when he sees the flags left on the field, he goes and rescues the colors and then commanded his company in another attack. Beatty was commendated on the battlefield by Butler, actually promoted sergeant major, and he was breveted by Butler as a first lieutenant. Well, you know, what Butler said didn't always get very far. It said that he took command of his company, all the officers have been killed or wounded, and gallantly led it. Now, the post-war, believe it or not, Palatine will actually be, he wrote a play known as Delmar, or The Scenes of the Southland. It's about Reconstruction, where he travels with a very famous actress, Henrietta Vinton Davis. They do Shakespearean productions. Beatty plays King Henry VI, Macbeth, Ingomar the Barbarian, and of course, King Lear. Oh my gosh, and he founded the Library and Literary Club in downtown Cincinnati. He was an excellent and outstanding individual. Now, we have several others. This is actually Christian Fleetwood's Medal of Honor. Now, I have to tell you that this is quite an item. The others that were there, such as First Sergeant James Brandon, he took command of his company, all the officers being killed or wounded. He rallied his men and stayed in the Army until September of 1865, and he kind of disappears. Not all of the Medal of Honor serving, of course, at the Battle of New Market Heights were African American. There is another individual who served in the assault from the 24th Maine Regiment, known as Thomas Blocher, who received his Medal of Honor in 1865. And he with Edgerton are the two white officers that received those. Now, I got to tell you, the bravery, and this is one of the people that received it with Edgerton. This is Alexander Kelly. This is in his older age. I have to say, Edgerton goes on to become personnel director of the Pennsylvania Railroad. He's a farmer, moves out to Oregon, dies in 1932. However, he is going to he doesn't get his Medal of Honor until 1898. It doesn't say he is a recipient on his grave on his farm in Oregon. Fleetwood is one of the more interesting individuals in all this. If I can find him, I'll be happy. There he is, Christian Fleetwood. He was born free. He was literate. He actually went to Liberia. He studied at the Maryland State Colonization Society. He is going to be Sergeant Major of the 4th USCT. He's on the left flank during the battle. He, along with Alfred B. Hilton, were there. Hilton is actually bearing 2 flags, never to let them touch the ground. And when Hilton is again wounded, Fleetwood and another USCT member, Charles Veal, each grabbed the flag from him, and so that it would not touch the ground, forced to retreat. Fleetwood uses the flag to rally the men. His commendation says, seized the colors after 2 color bearers had been shot down and bore them nobly through the fight. He also received what was known as, we're going to go back to all these people, the Butler Medal. And let me tell you, the Butler Medal was created by Ben Butler himself, because he said there's too many men that did conspicuous actions to this battle that are not being accommodated. And so consequently, Butler himself writes, I had the fullest reports made to me of the acts of individual bravery of colored men on that occasion. And I've done for the Negro soldiers what the government had never done for its white soldiers. I had a medal struck of like size and weight, quality and fabrication and intrinsic value with those medals that Queen Victoria awarded the enlisted men serving with valor during the Crimean War. And I record with pride that in that single action, there were so many deserving. There were 199 of these medals produced. It depicts on the front the African-American soldiers marching forward against those earthworks are supposed to be Newmarket Heights. And on the obverse, it says, freedom will be theirs by the sword. Oh my gosh, red, white, and blue ribbon. And I have to tell you, Christian Fleetwood goes on to actually marry a great granddaughter of Vice President Aaron Burr, and he forms the Washington Cadet Corps, part of the DC National Guard. He offers to raise a regiment during the Spanish-American War, but is refused. Another one of my favorites is going to be this man. Well, I think they're all so brave. I can't go beyond it. This is James Daniel Gardner. Let me tell you, he rushed in front of the advance of his brigade, shot a rebel officer who on the parapet, rallying his men, and then ran him through with his bayonet. Wow, you know, and this appears on the flag of the 22nd USCT. He is going to, unfortunately, he does not do well in the Army afterwards. He will be promoted to sergeant, then demoted to private. And actually, he is from Yorktown, Virginia, and comes back to Virginia, and he will participate in the building of the first African-American resort in the South, Bayshore at Buckaroo Beach, Virginia. We heard the story, Kelly. This is Milton Holland, who Milton Holland actually is called on his records a mulatto. He actually knew who his father was, and his father was actually a slave owner known as Bird Holland, who was actually killed at the Battle of Mansfield, and his mother was enslaved. Her name was Matilda. He took command of Company C after all the officers had been killed or wounded and gallantly led it. He is buried at Arlington Cemetery. There are 3 others of these Medal of Honor recipients buried at Arlington Cemetery. Actually, I have to say there are another 3 buried in the Hampton Cemetery, Hampton National Cemetery here on the peninsula. Actually, there is going to be a monument created here in Hampton Roads that is in West Point Cemetery, and he was organized by William Fuller. He was the first Black Norfolk council member, and it is of William Carney, who was a Norfolk native. However, there are 8 natives of the Hampton Roads region that are represented by that. William Carney is said that he received the first Medal of Honor, and that's for the action at Fort Wagner or Battery Wagner in 1863, but he actually did not receive it until 1896. So the stories of these men just make you feel as if this is a Norfolk regiment, a Norfolk native. Once again, he received the Butler Medal. He received the, and you can see in civilian, this is in veteran dress because you see his Union buttons, but you can see a GAR medal, the Butler Medal, and the Medal of Honor. It is so significant. What does this all mean? I have to say that in the words of Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood, He remembered that his fellow blacks fought so well because they felt intensely the need to prove their bravery to the world. They stood in the full glare of the greatest searchlight, part and parcel the grandest army mustered in this continent, with the bravest and the best, and losing nothing in comparison. As Frederick Douglass said, you put on that blue uniform, that buckle with the U.S., give that black man a musket, and he will prove he is worthy of freedom. So that is my take on the Battle of Newmarket Heights. I didn't mention all of the Medal of Honor recipients. I'll do so in a blog one of these days. It is truly an amazing story. Many of the citations are very similar. Save the colors, led their men. But I do think that as we look through these men, we recognize that they were fighting the freedom of their race. And that's exactly what they do with great bravery. That, in fact, Ben Butler is credited that that was his best battle. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the program. You can, of course, send me an email if you have other questions, etc. We have future programs coming up. And I have started doing live lectures here at the museum on Fridays, and it's more of a discussion group. So anyway, I'll have another couple of lectures next month. So if you have any questions, please ask away.
John, we have lots of questions.
Oh gosh.
Before we get into questions, though, your next virtual lecture is October 8th, virtually,
Yes.
like this one today, about the USS Cumberland, the power of iron over wood.
My favorite story.
Yes, and October 15th, we do have limited availability to come see John in person if you're near the museum at noon, about the Kentucky campaign, and you can sign up for both of these on the website. But we do have lots of questions, and we might have to copy them and get you to answer them directly, John, since we're running a little short on time, but we're going to start with a few of them, and we will get back with Nils, particularly has lots of questions that hopefully you can answer him later.
Okay.
First off, why do you think Benjamin Butler fared much better in the Battle of Newmarket Heights than in other military campaigns?
I think because, number one, it was a ruse. The Fifth Offensive, strike at the western part of the Confederate lines, strike at the eastern part of the Confederate lines. And so it put pressure on the Confederate lines. And he had a message to prove. And he had great subordinates, William Birney, Edward Ord. And plus he had these soldiers that were determined to prove that they were as brave and as gallant and with the same ability to fight as anyone. So after the Crater debacle, they had lots to prove. And Butler recognized that, motivated them, and in part did a great job. He did not capture Richmond, but when you compare this to Butler at Big Bethel, Butler at Cape Hatteras, Butler at Fort Fisher, this is his best action.
Judith asked, were the benefits of being a Medal of Honor recipient given to these men and their families retroactively, posthumously, to the time that they should have been awarded?
No. In fact, receiving a Medal of Honor during the Civil War and Indian Wars did not mean you got a pension for life. It was not like today, where Medal of Honor recipients, receive a pension and so forth. What the Medal of Honor meant during the Civil War was that these men stood up in part and parcel in the glare of the searchlight and proved that they were soldiers beyond compare and did such heroic actions that we still marvel at them today.
Which Civil War battles had the most medals of honor awarded?
let me do my count. I think it's either Fort Fisher or Mobile Bay, believe it or not. This one is on the top 5 for sure. Mobile Bay, one ship had 9 awards awarded, the Brooklyn. So because it was, very heroic at the attack on Fort Fisher, without a doubt. There were numerous men, no African Americans at Fort Fisher, however. Well, yes, one Thomas Thomas English, who was on board the USS New Ironsides, he was the highest ranking naval African American. He was signal quartermaster. So yes, there are a couple of battles where it's like Butler sent out 24 just at the Battle of Newmarket Heights. So you just imagine it's like parcel and candy and stuff, but it was significant because those men that received that were to be very noted.
I think I read that, and I may be wrong, that there were 30 of those Butler medals minted. I think I read.
No. There's 199. If you want to see one, you can see one at the Virginia War Museum, which is right down the street from the Mariners Museum. I used to work there for 30 years before I worked at the Mariners. So, and I actually acquired that from a very famous collector known as Norm Flaterman. So that was a tremendous object, and is still on display, I think.
I think so. Thaddeus and Micah, 2 of your young fans that were with us last Friday, John, in person, are asking, do you have a favorite officer in this battle, and why?
Well, I think Charles Paine does an excellent job. I think both Milton Holland and Christian Fleetwood, who were, they wanted to make them commissioned officers and then couldn't. I do think the Confederates got flat-footed. I am a fan of Butler because of his political actions, but I like to point to Newmarket Heights as where he was the most competent. I got a whole lecture on Ben Butler, which I'll give one day. But I think Alonzo Draper. I think Charles Paine, Edward Ord, William Birney, they all and William Birney's brother, David Birney, is going to be killed in the capture of part of Fort Harrison. If you go to Fort Harrison, you can see Federals captured just part of the fort, and the rest of the fort is held by the Confederates. So it's like, it's almost unbelievable. So I think all the officers and especially some of the enlisted men, their records are amazing.
What's your thought on Lee's letter to Confederate Mississippi Congressman Ethelbert Barksdale, stating, with reference to the employment of Negroes as soldiers, I think the measure not only expedient but necessary. The Negro will make an efficient soldier. It would be neither just nor wise, in my opinion, to require them to serve as slaves.
Well, I think the writing's on the wall for the Confederacy. Actually, a couple other Confederate officers, Patrick Claiborne, actually recommended that in 1864. There were 2 units organized, but they really didn't see much action. There are quite a few in the Confederate Navy that actually fight all the way to Durham Station, fight all the way to Appomattox Courthouse. And so you really so you can go through the records of every ship and identify these African Americans. Just because they had dark hair, dark eyes, and dark complexion doesn't mean they're African American, and that's something people have that problem with. And so what we do know is mostly on these muster rolls, they will say Negro, colored, mulatto, so forth. they will actually note slave or free man. There's some Confederate officers that enlisted their enslaved people into a regiment so they'd be their servant. Well, they cook and that sort of stuff. But the big thing is that that officer got paid for the enslaved person's wages or soldier's pay as well as his own. So it's a complex story. There are many books out there that have tried to really delve into African Americans in the Confederacy, and as well as just African Americans during the entire war. I have focused mostly on those on the monitor, actually. And I got interested in Newmarket Heights because while they was trying to preserve it, I actually wrote a report for the Park Service about the battle. And so it kind of stuck with me. So, but that's this topic. There's more to be said about it, and more research needs to be done, especially those black tars in the Confederate Navy.
Why did Butler not use cannon against the Heights at the battle?
Well, so this is called element of surprise. Okay, we want to hit their running and really catch them flat-footed so that they are able to bring reinforcements. They can't do this, they can't do that. And if we're able to do that without capped muskets and so forth, we may win a victory. Unfortunately, soldiers moving through the woods, all the birds and the squirrels start running the other direction. It's like that at Chancellorsville is probably the best story. There's the 11th Corps was out near Wilderness Church, and they were all German, right? Immigrants. And so they reported to O.O. Howard, there are Confederates out there. There are all these birds and deer running into our camp. He goes, you dumb Dutch, you don't know what you're talking about. And then Jackson attacked, and the Federals were soundly defeated.
And you've written blogs about Mobile Bay and Fort Fisher, John. So
yes.
Much more information of yours is on our blogs.
And I also wrote one of African American Medal of Honor recipients in the Navy.
Navy, that's right. So you can find that, and there's lots more to learn there. We'll have to wrap it up here because of respecting your time, but we are going to contact anyone that we can get here in the questions for John to answer directly back. The final question, though, I think is interesting. Did Butler have an award ceremony for these medals? If so, where and when?
He used the same ceremony that was done at April 6, 1862. And so that's he's no longer in command. He had been removed from command of the Army of the James, replaced by Alfred Terry. So it was a separate ceremony. He was not there, but he did have his medal. And in that quote I gave you, he actually laments, my former troops, those that I led to glory. I mean, it's like, okay, Ben, enough of that. I mean, they were awarded all on the same day. So yes, it was symbolic. And the Butler medals are very, very rare. And so are those awarded to. There is one that was never picked up because the man deserted. And that was a man in the Navy. So, oh well,
And they were crafted by Tiffany, which
the Butler medals, yes, they were.
The Butlers, yes.
I wore a Tiffany watch today just in honor of that.
Very good, very good. And John, would you advance to the last slide, please, so we can give people that contact info that are new to us. And again, I will try my utmost to get Palatine Beatty's slide properly credited, and also get your questions to John that we were able to capture. But thank you all so much for another great lunchtime being with you, and we look forward to your being with us next time. And hopefully, if you're in the area, come to our in-person if you sign up first online. And thank you, John, as always, and Leon for your help.
Huzzah!
Great weekend, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Huzzah!